Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Home Video Library. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. This time we circle back to something we've seen from the US relatively recently, and some other things we've seen in the relatively recent past from the UK, and kind of blend those two topics together. You may recall that back when The Force Awakens was first released on home video, the UK had a somewhat different approach than the United States. In the US, we had all kinds of different retailer exclusives and whatnot, and most of the ways that you could buy The Force Awakens, at least initially, was in essentially a pack that had a Blu-ray of the film with no commentary, a Blu-ray of bonus features, and then you had a DVD packed in and a code for a digital copy that was packed in as well. Well, in the UK, as you may recall, the whole idea of digital copies packed in with physical copies isn't as big a thing as it is here in the US, and neither is the idea of having DVDs packed in with Blu-rays. Americans tend to just want everything in one package. The result of this was that there were some different approaches taken in the UK, as I mentioned. Thanks to Julian Smith over in the UK, I was able to show you the two main sleeve variants that you would see in the UK. You would get the dark side sleeve version, the same old packaging underneath in a blue case as opposed to a black case like in the US, but this only had the regular Blu-ray, again, without commentary, and the bonus Blu-ray, absolutely no DVD, absolutely no digital copy. Alongside this, they also released the light side version. Again, same underneath, different sleeve. This was sort of the equivalent of the exclusives that we saw in the US, where in some cases, like say with the Walmart exclusive edition, it was really just the sleeve and a little pack-in connections coin that made all the difference. The sleeve being the biggest, most visible difference between those variants. If you wanted a DVD, you had to buy it separately, another item that Julian sent over for us to check out. And went into all the details of the different types of subtitles and languages and whatnot that were used, comparing those to the items from the US. I was then able to pick up a little while later an exclusive from Zavvi, another retailer over in the UK, which was their exclusive version of the Steelbook. Again, having that package on it, but essentially the same Steelbook we saw in that Japanese set, and that it doesn't have any text on the front, the back, doesn't have the name on the spine, it's just those pictures on the spine, specifically so that this Steelbook package could be used in multiple regions without having to constantly update it with new language for the labels. They simply ripped all the labels off the thing for this particular version of the Steelbook. Again, though, Blu-ray bonus disc, no DVD, no digital content. Then right at the end of 2016, there was a release in the UK that has no US equivalent, which is the big sleeve edition. We took a look at this, how it's got those art prints and whatnot, but that basically this is the first Blu-ray DVD combo pack for The Force Awakens that the UK received. Essentially, it has the updated Blu-ray disc, the movie disc, with the commentary that was in the 3D Collector's Edition packed in here, along with the updated Blu-ray bonus disc with extra bonus features, also from the 3D collection, put into here. Then you've got the DVD packed into here, no Blu-ray 3D disc, no digital code, and those art prints. Again, this has no US equivalent, but it's kind of like a Blu-ray DVD combo pack. Similar in style to what we saw for the initial releases in the US with no digital content and the updated rather than the original discs. Well, there was one step in all of that for the UK that I hadn't been able to show you because I hadn't been able to get my hands on it, and Julian has stepped in and sent in another item to add to the collection that I can feature here on the show to show us that other UK step in the evolution of The Force Awakens on home video. Between the release of the original version and the end of 2016, in the US, we saw the 3D Collector's Edition, which also has a UK equivalent. This was the US version. I've got the little paper slip still on here because it is going to make a little bit of a difference here in terms of packaging style. Just barely covering up the ends. This is a bit thick. Has the proof of purchase on the side. Down here at the bottom it says Blu-ray 3D, Blu-ray plus DVD plus digital HD. Has our specs on the back. There's no bottom to the little cardboard piece, so we just pull that off. This is how it'll be on most people's shelves. And inside here, within that lenticular packaging, we've got our battle scenes. Then we open it up. There's going to be little slips in this one, right, for digital content. And then you got 4 discs set against the whole Millennium Falcon going into hyperspace with the Rathtar on it type of image behind it. We've got the updated film disc that has the commentary. We got the updated bonus disc. We have the Blu-ray 3D disc with Kylo Ren on it. And then we've got the DVD, which is just a repackage. But the Blu-rays were updated. Blu-ray 3D was new. DVD was the old one just stuck in here with all that new content. The digital codes then also gave you that new extra bonus content. The question I had was, how does that 3D Collector's Edition from over here compare to the one in the UK, that missing link, so to speak, in our coverage thus far of The Force Awakens from the UK? Turns out, there are some significant differences. This is The Force Awakens 3D Collector's Edition from the UK. You notice here, first off, of course, you got your ratings on the front. That is typical. Blu-ray 3D symbol down here in the corner. Rather than saying Blu-ray 3D, Blu-ray, DVD, and Digital HD, this one says Blu-ray 3D, Blu-ray, and bonus disc. So it's giving you essentially the names of the 3 discs that are in here. You have your ratings and such on the side, rather than having your proof of purchase there. The back is designed a little bit different as far as the color scheme goes for the information down here. And then this actually does have a bottom. So if I want to keep this on my shelf like this, it's not that big of a problem because it's on there nice and tightly. I try to do that with the US one, with that little flimsy thing that doesn't have a bottom on it, and I got to be real careful that I don't wind up damaging that as I put it on and off the shelves. So we take that off of here, again, with a nice solid bottom, and we've got the packaging itself. And you might first think, oh, well, it's the same thing. Kind of. The fronts are the same. The backs are essentially the same, except the product numbers are different. In the US, it's 8042446, and in the UK, it's BVTSC001100A. Okay, sure, why not? But when you actually put them side by side, one thing you might notice is that the Blu-ray symbol and the Lucasfilm symbol are flipped. But check these out closely here. There is a slight width difference. Because the US one has 4 discs in it and the UK one has 3 discs in it, the UK one is able to be a little more narrow, which I actually think looks nicer on the shelf than the US one that seems a little bloated width-wise for what's actually inside. Otherwise, the packaging is pretty much the same. We've got our battle scenes. Before we open it up. There is no need to worry about little slips falling out, though, because still, even though they now have the Blu-ray 3D disc included, we have no digital copy, so no digital code included, no little slips of paper. Also, you'll notice only 3 discs. Again, it is the UK's updated version of the film with the commentary, updated bonus disc, the same 2 that wind up being repackaged in the big sleeve edition. You have your Blu-ray 3D disc, essentially the same as the US one, except, of course, the different rating logos and whatnot on there. No DVD. It's, again, there is no DVD combo pack aspect to this. The first time the DVD will be packaged with the Blu-rays is going to be in the big sleeve edition a little while later. So very similar, same content with some different languages we'll take a look at, but, again, a different approach in terms of what types of content are packaged together, what formats get packaged together. Now again, if you look at the fine print on the US copy, you'll find that it's English, Spanish, and French that are available on that one. You check out the UK one, which has a lot more specifics listed here, you will find that the language, the audio for the Blu-ray 3D is in English, Czech, French, and Hindi. On the regular Blu-ray, again, English, French, and Hindi, but no Czech. And then the bonus features just in English. From a subtitle standpoint, for the US, you have English, Spanish, and French down here in the fine print. Then in the much larger, much nicer, more detailed table on the UK copy, we find that on the Blu-ray 3D, there's English for the hearing impaired, as there is on the US also, but you have subtitles for Arabic, Czech, Danish, Dutch, Finnish, Norwegian, Swedish, and French. For the Blu-ray, you have English for the hearing impaired, Arabic, Danish, Dutch, Finnish, Norwegian, Swedish, and French. And then for the bonus features, English for the hearing impaired, Arabic, Czech, Dutch, German, Italian, Polish, Portuguese, Romanian, Russian, Spanish, and French. So again, by being released in a region where more languages are commonly spoken, you have a release that needs to have more language options than what you tend to see in the US, where generally, if it's in the US market, it'll be US, may wind up showing up in Canada, may wind up making its way into Mexico and other parts of Latin America, so generally you're going to wind up seeing English, You're going to wind up seeing Spanish, you're going to wind up seeing French, but that's pretty much it, usually in the United States. Now you may be wondering, okay, wait, if I buy this version, will it play in a US player? Again, these are Blu-rays. Blu-rays tend to be region-free. I did do a test, and yes, at least on my PlayStation 3 that I use as my 3D Blu-ray player, and PlayStation-branded 3D display, it did work just fine to play the Blu-ray 3D disc in that US setup. Now, I would always say that with 3D Blu-rays, I'd probably go with an American release, if possible, on an American player, or another region's player with its disc, just because the specifications, if they vary at all, will match up better for the same region. But it seemed as though this works pretty well. No discernible differences from what I could tell, aside from just the language options and whatnot, if you were to play the 3D disc in the US. But that begs a pair of questions. This was actually a really cool release, but again, unfortunately, for the UK, no DVD or digital copy included. But the question it begs to me is about the timing of releases. They had a weird staggered setup of releases, and hopefully this won't become the norm. But for instance, you had the Force Awakens when first released, and then the 3D version. But particularly the first release had different release dates in different regions that spread across about a month time frame, give or take. In the case of the UK, they got the original release of the Force Awakens about a week or two before the US did. But then you flip that around, and the UK got the 3D version about 2 weeks before the US did. Really an odd arrangement, particularly given the fact that we're talking about predominantly Blu-rays that can be played in any region. So if somebody really wanted a copy of The Force Awakens and didn't want to wait those 2 weeks, they could order it from a different region and already be watching it while waiting for the official release in their country. Just seems like a strange setup to me. Why stagger if they're mainly region-free anyway? But the second question that this raises is less about this release and more about the future of these kinds of release. In January 2017, there was an announcement from Sony and LG. And it was a big one, because see, Sony and LG were the last two television manufacturers who were still adding 3D capability to their new televisions. The announcement was that that was over. LG and Sony have given up on including 3D on new TVs. And that was something you've been seeing slowly but surely from company after company since about 2012-ish. I believe 3D was introduced around 2010, gave it a couple of years, and then companies just started dropping it because the profitability just wasn't there. Not enough demand for 3D televisions, and the added cost to add that feature to a television made those TV sets less competitive against others of the same size from different companies. So here we are, awaiting Rogue One and an announcement about Rogue One on home video sometime in the near future here, because I'm recording this in the middle of February 2017. We still do not have any word on an actual release date for Rogue One. And we're wondering, will Rogue One see a 3D release? What about the prequels that we know already exist in 3D, that we expected a 3D release of already, but that still haven't been released on 3D Blu-ray? Will we see any of these happen? Because now the only way to watch 3D at home would be if you have an older TV, an older 3D Blu-ray player, or Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3. Or if you have one of those players and a 3D projector, which is a line that is still being manufactured by various companies here. It's the TVs that aren't. The projectors still are. Or it's just been announced that with firmware update 4.5, PlayStation 4 is going to allow you to watch 3D Blu-rays inside your PlayStation VR headset if you've got one of those, because it already uses stereoscopic 3D to create those virtual environments with a sense of depth. So there are going to be still ways to play Blu-ray 3D discs, but not as many, not with TVs unless you have an older one. What does this mean for the production of 3D Blu-rays in the US and elsewhere? I would imagine that's going to wind up cutting back on them quite a bit. You already see places. I went to a couple of local Walmarts recently, and among their stock, almost all of the 3D releases are gone. Used to be they would have a few, and it'd be Target that would have pretty much everything that had a 3D release. There would be a 3D version still sitting on the shelves. Not at Walmart, which is a big American consumer outlet. So you gotta wonder, what's going to happen here, and I'm hoping that someday in the very near future we're going to find out what's going on with Rogue One, and hopefully they'll get a 3D release out initially. If not, I don't see them doing the double dipping of giving us a 3D release down the line, because 3D at home is apparently, if not dying, then nearly so. And it's really in question whether or not we're going to see these types of releases for Star Wars again. It could be that The Force Awakens winds up the anomaly, the only Star Wars content released on Blu-ray 3D disc. We'll just have to see. Again, thank you so much to Julian Smith for helping out with this collection, this particular item, adding it in here, giving me a chance to show it here on the show. Again, this is the 3D Collector's Edition from the UK, a little bit different than what we saw here in the US. As always, thank you all for watching, and may the Force be with the home video viewers.